Okay, so the big question on our minds: why did Sony come to you guys to put the PSP on display at the Game Developers Conference a couple weeks ago?
We can't talk about it. I actually don't know if we can talk about it.
No, we can't.
Are you serious?
That's unfortunate. We can always say how much we enjoyed it.
Okay.
It was awesome being part of the keynote at GDC, and we really appreciate the opportunity that Sony gave us.
But you can't say why Sony Sony spotlighted you guys.
You had to ask them.
Yeah, that's unfortunate.
You don't want to say how great your games were in the past.
Yeah, but like the whole problem, like when you work with Sony, they kind of brief you. This could be used there too, but it's just like there's only so many things you can and can't say, and a lot of it's tied to
like our NDA,
yeah.
is pretty severe, so
Yeah.
we can't say anything.
Well, Death Jr. was originally going to be a console game. I mean, back a couple of years ago, you guys were talking about doing a console, Xbox PS2 version of Death Jr. So why is it going directly to PSP?
Well, last year we showed off Death Jr. behind closed doors on Xbox and PS2 at GDC, and over the course of the year we continued development on Xbox and PS2. But as soon as we found out about PSP last E3, we were super excited about it because obviously we've been developing this cross-platform 3D strategy and 3D engine, and then of course we have this huge wealth of handheld experience from the digital flip side of the company, and so. It definitely seemed like, we had to be on the system. So we immediately started doing a lot of research. We put together like some white papers just on like what the system was going to be able to do. So when we got the emulator, we were ready to just like go full speed ahead. And of course, DJ is what we always use to test our engine and that kind of stuff. And so once we started to get DJ on PSP, it was like, wow, this is a good fit. Like, not only can DJ use a lot of the hardware-specific features of PSP to like great extent, like morphing and the splines and stuff like that, but also when you're launching a new property, it's always easier to do it at the launch of a new system versus kind of like at the tail end of the life cycle of the system, or sort of once it's at its prime or something like that.
But even more on the morphing side, a lot of the design for Death Jr. involves thematically the transformation of this entire town and all sort of thing. And there's a lot of stuff we're going to do on the console side that was going to take a lot of work that the PSP actually had built in. So it was like it was a natural choice along the lines where seeing the PSP spec come over, we're like, holy crap, we can do this on PSP and it's going to be a lot easier.
So were there any sacrifices that you had to make in the move to PSP over the PS2? Or was there anything that couldn't be done?
There were some sacrifices. I would say the biggest sacrifice was control, because we had planned the game with dual analog. And because the PSP has a single analog, we have to rethink the way we do the control.
Yeah,
that's not too difficult.
That was like the main thing. Like, other than that, like the performance levels we're seeing at a PSP, just based on our research and what we're seeing on the emulator and everything, like it's no sacrifice. Like we're using the exact same model data that we had on PS2 on PSP. Like no changes at all.
You mentioned at GDC that it only took a few weeks to move it over from the PS2 to the PSP. And in terms of actual time for building new stuff on the PSP, how long does that take? I
kind of know where you're going with that.
Yeah. How long does it take to build new content for the game once it's been moved over?
You can jump anytime you want to, Chris, but I'd say like new content on the PSP, it's a little bit easier to develop content for the PSP because the screen's so much smaller. And the amount of detail that you have to put into a console title, you don't have to go as far on PSP.
And still have it look really good.
And still have it look really good. Textures, for instance, the texture sizes don't have to be so large. You're talking about like a 256 by 256 texture map at most, really, for the PSP, whereas on console you go much greater than that for detail.
Yeah, the other thing, just in terms of like developing, getting new features implemented in the engine and stuff, when you're working on PSP, because it's a pretty straightforward system to develop for, that's actually a lot easier. It's a lot more like when we were doing development on GameCube than it is, for some other more complicated systems.
So everyone's seen the game in motion and kind of knows visually what it's going to be like and what it looks like, but we don't really know a lot about actually how the game works and what the main goal is and what some of the concepts are. Can you talk about that at all?
Well, the most important thing to realize probably about the game that might not have come across, in videos that people have seen so far, is that it's really it's a hardcore action game. It's not, You're not collecting any gems. It's not like a slow-paced game where you sort of explore and you see an enemy and you sneak up to him and he turns and looks at you and fires a single shot and you dodge it and you kind of go up to him and you kill him and then you see another enemy but you want to get a glass of milk, so you set down the controller for 15 minutes and you come back and you can still see that enemy right over there.
Yeah,
like, this is a game where if you stop playing it for a second, you will die. Like, you're in a really hostile world, and we wanted to make a really intense game that really is more evocative of games like Robotron than it is like a platformer from like the 16-bit era or something like that. So, I mean, this is a game where you have a lot of stuff to do, and stuff's constantly coming at you. You don't sneak around and try and find enemies. You're never going to be bored trying to find something to do. Like, you're going to be constantly like reacting and fighting and like doing stuff. It's definitely not a slow-paced game.
The player's always engaged and you're always in constant jeopardy, pretty much.
Yeah, it's just, I mean, the goal is to make it, if you, like I mentioned Robotron a second ago, but that's probably the one game that, we think of when we're kind of taking our design inspiration of like, we want you to be playing this game and go like, holy crap, you know what I mean?
And you gotta have a lot of fun in a short period of time, because the other thing too is we don't want to track too many things, because somebody play this game for an hour or two, put it down and come back to it a week later. And if you're thinking of games that are like, say Metroid or whatever, where you have to remember where certain doors were and then certain levels, like we can't really play that up in this kind of situation. So we have to really make it more bite-sized gameplay chunks.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a handheld game, and so it has like those sort of handheld goals in terms of like level size and stuff like that. It's a game that's easy to pick up, get into, have some really intense fun. And then, like, if you need to, because whatever, your bus comes, there's time to go to sleep, or your girlfriend shows up, whatever, you can set it down, and, it's not going to be, I don't think anybody's going to be complaining, like, oh, it took too long to find save points, or anything like that. This is going to be an intense, fast-paced experience.
The game, started out as a console game and has moved over to PSP. Do you think on the PSP market you're going to have the same luxury of time? I mean, it seems like you've had a lot of time to work on the game, both on the console and then porting it over to the PSP. In future products on the system, do you think you're going to have that same luxury?
Well, we've definitely, just on Death Junior specifically, we had the luxury of being able to work on it for a long time, just as we've been self-funding it. And, I don't know what the development cycle is going to be like for PSP games post-launch, but we're building up such a huge suite of tools now that, like, a lot of things that we're spending a lot of time doing now on PSP, we're not going to have to do again. You know what I mean? It's just going to be there for you. That's just on the development side. So we think like development schedules are going to be able to be, pretty aggressive on PSP.
Particularly because the platform was designed actually to keep in mind that people would have to develop games in a shorter period of time. So there's a lot of hardware freebies that Sony gives you with the device. The auto tessellation stuff, all those features you read on the whole feature list for the hardware, those are all there for a reason, and they're there to make sure that it's a much faster development process for game development. Oops. Development for development. It's all what it's for.
Since it did start off as a console game, are there still any plans to perhaps continue down that path and bring it to the consoles somewhere down the line?
We're developing Death Junior exclusively for PSP.
Eventually, who knows, like there's going to be new platforms coming up and all that stuff. We'd love to think about that later, but for now our focus is PSP. We want to take advantage of all the features of PSP and make sure that the license takes advantage of that.
Do you think the Death Junior character might become Backbone's like mascot character, kind of like Naughty Dog's, Jack and Daxter, or Insomniacs?
That'd be cool.
Well,
are you? Our focus right now, honestly, is like on making a good game.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like stuff that comes down the road. Whether or not DJ becomes like Backbone's mascot or anything like that. I mean, that would be awesome, but like that's not our primary focus. Is on like we got to make this game really fun, not on like we're gonna get it on our shirts or something like that.
Yeah, the challenge is definitely making sure the design's solid and that it's going to be really fun at launch, because there's a tendency for launch games to sometimes have a lot of mistakes made because of the time frame and all that sort of thing. We've had the luxury, of course, of having this kind of in development for a little while longer, so there's a lot of mistakes we've made already that we're going to like attack new and fresh with the PSP. But even that's still a challenge, trying to make the launch date.
Anything that that we saw at in that demo, the public demo, is there anything there that you wish you could have cleaned up or done differently? Anything specifically that you'd like to?
Absolutely, the public demo was. Can I?
Yeah.
Well, the public demo that we had at the GDC keynote, was mainly a way to demonstrate the PSP specifics, like morphing and special effects, all these things you could do with the PSP, and also to kind of give an idea of what we do. But the game was extremely early. Like this was the opportunity came up, and we're still like developing things for the game and environments for the game. So definitely, like we've seen all the comments, like the octagonal moon and like all these things, and those were things that we're really conscious of even going into the demo. That a lot of that stuff that you've seen in the demo there, you won't even see in the final product.
Yeah, it was a technology demonstration. It didn't show a ton of gameplay. The other thing I would say is just, it's tough to take a screen that's like 400 by 200 pixels, more or less, and project it, like 30 feet big. You see a lot of things that, when you're actually designing for the hardware, wouldn't show up. So, but there's obviously, we have a ton of work to do in the game. We're really pleased with where things are. We're really confident with where things are going, but, we're not like resting on our laurels, or we're not planning to take a lot of vacations this summer or something like that. Like there's a ton of work to do.
And definitely more to that, like that, because it was a tech demo, we didn't show gameplay. So like, just ask everybody to like kind of hold their judgment on gameplay until they see a real gameplay movie. There's a lot of surprising things that I think people will see in the product.
So with that said, when do you think that we can see an actual gameplay movie or an opportunity to play it ourselves?
We'd love to show gameplay now. Like it's really it's up to Sony. They were super gracious in kind of letting us show the stuff that we showed at GDC, and hopefully we'd love to show more as soon as it's ready to show, and as soon as Sony.
I think a realistic time frame that you're going to see like games in general on PSP, particularly like ours in particular, and other games is going to be E3. You're going to see a lot more at E3, I believe.
What other than Death Jr., what else do you guys have down the pipeline in the future for? I guess every system that you guys.
We have we're working on a lot of games right now beyond Death Jr. We're working on a couple of things on PSP. Obviously other consoles.
There's a number of PS2 titles.
Yeah, our whole handheld lineage is continuing, really well. We're doing a ton of games right now.
Do you want to explain the differences between Backbone Entertainment and Digital Eclipse? The naming.
No, I would just say
like Backbone's our new name. It's a result of a merger between Digital Eclipse and Imagine Engine that happened about a year ago. And that's it.
That's it?
That's like
Are games going to be released under the Digital Eclipse branding still in the future?
Yeah, Digital Eclipse is known particularly for GBA, emulation, and a number of those kind of niche kind of products, licensed products, that sort of thing. And that's going to continue to go on forward. Backbone Entertainment's a bigger company that Digital Eclipse and Imagine Engine fit underneath. So you're going to see like original IPs and those sort of things coming from the Backbone angle. When Backbone was formed, the company grew significantly. We brought in a lot of incredible talent to make sure that we could launch a new IP properly and make sure that we're going to go into emerging platform markets, both feet forward, like PS3 and the Xbox 2, Xenon, that sort of thing. So Backbone is kind of a vehicle to make sure that we get onto emerging platforms quickly and with original content.
In terms of design opportunities and the jump from 2D to 3D for a handheld system, what kind of specific gameplay design elements can you now incorporate that you couldn't do before, and how has it really changed the way you approach a handheld game?
Well, the fact that PSP is 3D, versus 2D, it opens up all those exact same opportunities that you had, back in 1995 when you went from the Genesis to the PlayStation, right? Like there's just a huge world of genres that are opened up to you. The GBA you could do a lot on, but really when you're playing to its strengths, you're doing side-scrollers and top-down games. The PSP, when you're playing to its strengths, you still have to pay attention to handheld issues like length of play time and how far away you're holding the controller, or you're holding the system from your head and stuff like that, and the control scheme. But like the amount of genres that are opened up to you is, it's huge.
It isn't just on the 3D side.
A ton of stuff.
It isn't just on the 3D side because you have the multiplayer wireless.
Yeah, that's the other thing that I don't know if people are paying enough attention to. Like, it's not just the 3D. The 3D is awesome. The 3D is huge, but it's not just the 3D. What we're calling proximity gaming that you get from having this, Wi-Fi device that's aware of other Wi-Fi devices that it might come near. That opens up some huge, opportunities. And I think if you talk to a lot of developers right now, everybody's got ideas, but maybe everybody's a little bit cautious about even saying what they are because they're, I don't know if other people are doing the same thing or whatever. Like
it's also your developers are kind of cautious right now because we're under strict NDA to not discuss some of the bigger features of the PSP in detail. But Wireless is one that you can kind of discuss and say there's a lot more to it than just multiplayer gaming. There's a lot more design options that you have, particularly like what Chris mentioned earlier, like when you come within proximity of somebody, have the system be alerted to that, and then have like gameplay where it's like it could be somebody walking by with their system aware, and you be able to like communicate with those people and game on the go kind of thing. It's there's more to it.
There's some cool things there.
Yeah.
I was going to ask, like, is there any kind of restrictions in bringing Death Junior from console to, to the handheld that has more limited controls? We already talked about, the fact that it's one joystick versus, two joysticks. Do you think that the way the 3D platformers kind of evolved to require two joysticks, one per camera, that's going to affect the way, people adopt Death Junior?
I'm not too worried about it. We definitely took our time when we moved over to PSP and really spent like a lot of time trying to find the ideal controller configuration. But I think it can be done, and I think I think the controller scheme for the PSP is like what's the word? It's it's like broad enough that you're not going to feel super limited.
I mean, just think back to like games that run Dreamcast, and there's the same kind of. You have one analog, and you had like the D-pad and the buttons. It's very similar to a Dreamcast controller. So the kind of games you've done Dreamcast, you can imagine the controls kind of transferring over. But even more so, like taking that a little bit further and thinking back to like platformers and games that run N64 and that. So it's you can figure out how to do a game on it. It may to some seem like a step backward, but there's some other advantages to it. To the kind of games you're going to be putting on the system, anyways. Like how many games would you need the dual analogs for? On a smaller screen and that sort of thing. It's like some things are crossed off that list, some things are added to it. So,
what's your take on the library for the future of PSP?
I think there's a huge opportunity on PSP for original content because one of the things people are always saying is that like when they go around and they compare the game industry to the movie business and they're like, oh, there's no art house. Business model in the game industry. Game either has to be like a blockbuster or it's like a C game that doesn't sell any copies. And there's no way to make like for lack of a better term, like little games in the same way that you can make little movies in Hollywood, like a kind of art house flick, like
independent film.
Yeah, independent film, exactly. And I think like the PSP because it does enable like pretty modest development budgets, but you can still do a ton of really good-looking stuff even without spending and even without breaking the bank. That there's a chance that we might see the PSP as like this incredible like place for that kind of independent film style game. You know what I mean?
Well, if you think back to like what we have to do on GBA, because there's only so many genres you can do on GBA, that's just not going to feel like anything new at this point. And to really cover that up, you need the license, you need whatever to bring more excitement to that kind of game. On PSP, you can now do so many different kinds of genres. They're all open to you. Now it's a matter of like actually the gameplay selling the game, I think, going forward on PSP.
Yeah, but I think there's an opportunity. A game that like, might get lost in the shuffle on PS2, or it's an idea that might be a little too expensive to do on PS2 because it's a little risky. Like, because development costs are a little bit more modest on PSP, like maybe you can take those risks. And you can try it out on PSP. PSP is like a really robust system. It's, equal to a PS2 in strength. So you're not like sacrificing because of graphic capabilities or anything, and you can maybe be really successful at it, and then start to build the audience there, and then take it to PS3.
I think like a company like Sega would probably do pretty well on this.
Yeah,
because they have the arcade style gameplay that fits really well with handheld, and they can bring games like Crazy Taxi, like all those kind of original titles. That style of game development is going to kind of come back.
Well, do you think the mentality of only licensed games sell on the handheld platform, something that's familiar, original titles that don't have any kind of link to licenses or something like that do not sell on the Game Boy Advance. Do you think that's going to carry over to PSP? I mean, you're talking...
Yeah, I don't... See, that's the big question mark. I don't think so. Original titles have a hard time on any platform, right? I mean, original titles have a hard time on PS2, compared to a licensed title. But the problem is, so that's one of the reasons it's so tough to do an original title on PS2 is because it's a huge development expense and a huge risk for the publisher. Because PSP offers like a lower development expense, and so presumably, slightly less risk for the publisher, there's more incentive potentially to take risks on PSP. And that's kind of one of the things that excites me most about the platform.
I think the cost list for the UMD versus a cartridge also So playing that's what if you really want to identify like what's going to be more appealing to a publisher, because you can arguably say like, well, the budget for like a GBA game is not very big either, and like where's the risk and that sort of thing. But like on PSP, it's the actual manufacturing that's
Right.
going to be reduced.
Have they determined what the manufacturing costs will
We don't know that. We just
Well,
no.
no.
But you can assume, like just based off what you know,
be? Right.
it's going to be much more inexpensive than like a mechanical cartridge, sort of solid state cartridge
Right.
manufacturing that you get from